Hello, it's Pyram King with a role-playing game thought and idea. And this video is a manifestation of a series of conversations I had about my guides that I was creating for Curse of Strahd over the last 8 months. I've been writing expanded lore and guides to Curse of Strahd, both for Foundry and in PDF form, and weaving together this story, kind of bringing it all together. And they were asking me how I was coming up with these concepts and these ideas. And through the course of the conversation, I was trying to answer them as discreetly as I could. But at the end of the conversation, I realized what I was really doing, the process was I was answering the why question. And what do I mean by the why question? Well, in role playing games, players make informed or sometimes uninformed decisions that lead to actions that result in consequences which the player resolves. And in my mind, role playing games are defined by a series of consequences and resolution of those consequences. If we strip away that process, we're left with encounters and game mechanics. And as fun or exciting as one of those encounters may be, well, stringing a bunch of counters together really doesn't really make a story. In fact, I would argue we're actually playing a war game, and I love war games. I used to play a lot of Panzer Leader and Squad Leader back in the day. And there's a lot of great war games, Warhammer 40K, or you can play as Roman legions, or even in World War II. But a war game, it begins and ends at that encounter or that battle. You have a discrete set of rules, you build your army, and then you fight that encounter. And it's interesting to note that Gary Gygax started as a war gamer. In fact, he created Chainmail, eventually Dungeons & Dragons, where he introduced this concept or this story element of players making decisions. Those decisions lead to actions, whether they're social interactions or whether they're combat or other types of encounters, resulting in consequences and propelling a story forward based on those actions and decisions by the players. Now, if we look at one of the greatest storytellers of all time, probably the most duplicated and imitated storyteller and read by pretty much everybody on the planet, still learns about him, it's Shakespeare. And in my humble opinion, what makes Shakespeare great is his ability to answer the why question in the story. And what do I mean by the why question? Well, what Shakespeare does is he focuses on the motivation of the individuals that are driven by their emotions and their feelings. Fear, greed, love, hate, lust, envy, jealousy, all of those things manifest in the characters of his story that result in actions, sometimes shocking actions, that create these epic level consequences that either result in a farce in one of his comedies or in a tragic outcome. If we look at Shakespeare's body of work, his tragedies, and we look at them and measure them simply by their actions, they're pretty horrific. They're pretty, in some cases, offensive. I mean, he includes genocide, murder, patricide, suicide, rape, incest. They're sprinkled all throughout these tragedies. But Shakespeare does something very interesting. Shakespeare focuses on the motivation that leads to those actions, and in most cases, those actions happen off stage, and we're left with the consequences of those actions and the resolution to those consequences. We don't have to see the action. What makes Shakespeare's stories powerful is the motivations that are manifesting from the feelings that these characters are having. Now, Shakespeare also realized something very interesting, that history is actually a sequence of consequences that are motivated by people's actions and also their feelings. One of the greatest historical stories, or one of his greatest histories, is also from a historical perspective, is Julius Caesar. Shakespeare wrote Julius Caesar, the play, and if we look at it both from a Shakespearean eye, but we also look at it from a historical eye, it is an epic level event that happens. In Julius Caesar, he's the general of the Roman army, of the Roman Republic. Roman Republic has existed for about 400 years, and he's coming back from these multiple victories. He's hugely popular among the people of Rome, but the city and the capital of Rome, the province of Rome, there's a river in the north. And if you're a general, you're not allowed south of that river to the capital of Rome unless you're invited by the Senate. Now, there is growing fear in the Senate that Caesar's become widely popular. He has his massive legions of his armies, his legions of the Roman army. He's this popular general that people love him. He's had these huge victories. And Caesar he's got huge misgivings about the Senate. He thinks they're corrupt. They've been leading Rome down the wrong path. Eventually, maybe in his lifetime, or perhaps after his lifetime, the republic will eventually crumble and fall. He believes that he is destined to bring Rome forward into a new era, a better era, and fix these wrongs, these corrupted wrongdoings of these senators. But he can't cross this river. He can't go south. If he goes south by himself as a general, not invited by the Senate, it's an act of treachery. The Senate has to invite this general. If he's to cross this river with his armies, it's an act of civil war. Now, we know what Caesar does. He crosses this river, and it's said in the history of Julius Caesar, when he crosses this river, he quotes a Greek play, and he says, "The die is cast," meaning his decision, that action, is a point of no return. The consequences of that action, there's no coming back from that. That river, by the way, is called the Rubicon River, and in our lexicon we refer to crossing the Rubicon as an epic level action resulting in epic level consequences with a point of no return. He is making it something that's going to have lasting ramifications. Now we know what happens. He crosses there, he becomes and declares himself emperor of there. Rome, 400 years of a Roman Republic, now becomes and is led into the Roman Empire. Caesar, of course, is murdered by Brutus in the Senate, who, as Caesar correctly pointed out, were corrupt. In fact, Caesar in Shakespeare's story is warned by the soothsayer of his death. He said, the soothsayer warned Caesar, "Beware of the Ides of March," meaning March 15th, which is the day that Brutus backstabs Caesar, and then all the other senators jump in with their knives and just, murder Caesar there in the Senate. Actually on the Senate floor. It's just crazy to think about. But it all happened from that catalyst event, that single event, he was motivated to make a simple action. The simple action was crossing that river, but the catalytic outcome of that is changed the course of all history. Why is understanding these consequences so important? Well, going back to Curse of Strahd, I was thinking about it. And what I did when I first got Curse of Strahd, I picked up the book and I read it cover to cover. I ignored the stat blocks and the tables and all the game mechanics. I wanted to understand the story, and I was searching for that Rubicon moment, crossing that Rubicon. And I found it in the story. In a spoiler alert, we know Strahd is a vampire, but what was the catalyst event that changed the course of history throughout Barovia? Well, Strahd arrived in Barovia, or in the valley, as a prince, a young prince with his armies. He also had his younger brother, and he was trying to defeat his enemies, build his castle, become lord of this valley, eventually Barovia. Now, his brother Sergei, his younger brother Sergei, was in love with this beautiful woman called Tatiana, which Strahd as well was in love with secretly. Strahd comes across these dark powers who promised him immortality and powers to defeat his foe, and if he agrees to this pact, that he will lead Barovia and become an immortal. However, in order to seal this pact, Strahd needs to seal this pact with blood of someone that he loves. Now, Strahd decides to kill his brother Sergei to seal this pact to become immortal and become a vampire and rule over Barovia, get all these powers. But in Strahd's mind, Strahd doesn't see it as murder or killing his brother. He sees it as his brother being sacrificed for Strahd's destiny, that Sergei and Strahd's destinies are woven and fate are woven together. His younger brother, who will never be prince or king, must sacrifice himself for his brother to become king, to rule over Barovia. As a side note, Strahd sees Tatiana, the woman that he secretly loves, his brothers love her, become full of sorrow, obviously, that her lover's murder, throw herself into Strahd's arms for comfort, and they will live happily ever after, and Strahd's destiny is fulfilled to rule over Barovia. Well, that doesn't happen when Tatiana finds out that Sergei is dead. She runs to the cliff at the castle, the Pillar of Ravenloft, commit suicide by leaping to her death 1,000 feet below. Her soul is encaptured within Barovia, constantly being reborn in the villagers of Barovia, and Strahd spends his eternity, the rest of his life, trying to find his lost love, the woman that he is desperately, madly in love with, and her soul is being reborn, but it's ever elusive. He's never able to fulfill that part of his destiny to be with the woman that he loves. That is his curse. His curse is the killing of his brother and never being able to ultimately have what he desires so much, and that's the love of Tatiana. It is this singular event, this pact, it's the Rubicon moment of Curse of Strahd. And everything that happens in the village of Barovia and Kresk and the entire valley of Barovia all happens because of this decision, this action that leads to these crazy consequences, these epic level consequences that affects everything in Barovia, whether directly or indirectly. The behavior of the people in the village of Kresk, what's happening in the Abbey, what happened in the Amber Temple, all of these things are manifestations, directly or indirectly, from Strahd's actions. That was the Rubicon moment. Now, if we pull on that thread, we're able to, as game masters, understand the motivations of the NPCs that we are responsible for. We understand why certain villages and places have been destroyed. We understand why some people are motivated to lead either out of fear or out of loyalty to Strahd. Some people actually hate Strahd, are enemies of Strahd. And so as I'm fleshing out these different scenarios and these different scenes throughout Curse of Strahd, I think back to that singular moment that created all this epic tragedy throughout the world. Now, if I believe if Shakespeare were alive today and he were to write any campaign for any role-playing game, it would certainly be Curse of Strahd. I mean, we have Macbeth, we have Romeo and Juliet, we have Richard III, pieces of Hamlet, and even pieces of the Tempest woven into this epic level tragic story. And it's been a delight and really fun to flesh out the lore and the reasoning behind all these locations and these NPCs. Now, why is this important for a game master to do and understand this Rubicon moment in your campaign and your adventure? When you understand that singular moment that lays forth the fabric of the entire world, not only the tone and the atmosphere, but the motivations of the NPC and the reasons why things are happening, you're able to answer to the why question of your players all the time. It helps you improvise on the fly quickly because you understand in the back of your mind the event and the motivation of that event and all the epic things that happen after that laid forth this either tragic or whatever realm that's happening in your world. It helps give reason and purpose and really brings the players further into the story. Now, what do I recommend? My recommendation is whether you're buying a campaign or adventure as written, read through it. Ignore all the mechanics, ignore the stat blocks, ignore the tables. Just read through it, understand the story, understand the motivation, identify the primary antagonist and protagonist, understand and find that Rubicon moment that changed the course of everything in that story. And then pull on that thread and let the story unfold so you understand the motivations of everyone else. Now, some campaigns have quite a bit of that fleshed out, but from my experience reading quite a few of them, they don't. They're a series of actions and they're a series of encounters, but we don't understand the why question. Why are people behaving this way? Why is the world the way it is? And when we understand the why question, we're able to answer that for our players. It really changes that gaming experience that your players are having. Well, that's my role-playing game thought. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know what you think that Rubicon moment, crossing the Rubicon moment was in your story or in your homebrew campaign or in maybe even Curse of Strahd. Thanks. Until next time, may all your roles be critically successful.